many medicine plants do not react well to the majority of pharmaceutical and/or prescriptive drugs, and many make you sick or give you a negative reaction or even a potential fatal reaction. You don't want a little death to turn out to be your final one. From my limited experience, it is pharmaceutical or prescription drugs that act or react negatively to everything else. Some years ago, after a fall, a shoulder dislocation, and an eventual minor procedure under a general anesthetic, the doctor put me on a prescribed painkiller to ease through the procedure. The procedure itself was relatively minor, the intention being to release a frozen shoulder through manipulation caused by dislocation. By all accounts, the procedure was relatively successful in that it did release the frozen shoulder and thus gave me more movement and flexibility of my right arm and shoulder, which was a great relief at the time. A painkiller was prescribed to be taken once, or at most twice, depending on the severity of pain over a period of 2 weeks, and not to be taken with alcohol or any recreational drugs, etc. But me being me, of course, didn't hear or read a bit about not drinking alcohol whilst using the painkiller. Come the following weekend, when the 2 weeks of taking painkillers had expired, a friend called and invited me to the local hostelry for a drink. The invitation was welcome and gladly taken up, as it got me out of the house. After all, 1 pint of Guinness never did anyone any harm. Sure, it wasn't so long ago that medical doctors themselves used to prescribe Guinness to pregnant women for its anecdotal health benefits and iron content, etc. To cut this short story, my gut was not feeling good, so I had to step outside for some air. And that was the end of my evening. My memory of the rest of that evening and night was completely obliterated. The mixture of the painkillers that were obviously still active in my body, the Guinness and the night air knocked me out. The next day, my friend gave me the details. There wasn't much detail to give. He picked me up off the ground, bundled me into a taxi, got me home, where my partner put me to bed to sleep it off. My partner was convinced it was a matter of having drunk too much alcohol, but it was not. It was the painkillers. They may kill pain, but they also have the potential to kill, so be very careful with prescription drugs, no matter how small a dose is prescribed by a doctor. On the physical health side, you will see and read from the voyages and experiences contained herein, and in particular with ayahuasca. You may need to be in relatively good health to cope physically with what you will be put through. If you have any serious or ongoing health issues or mental health concerns, again, although it pains me to suggest this, consult the doctor or physician that may be attending you. The group, organization, facilitator or shaman you are attending the ceremony with should also be asking you about your physical and mental health, about any illness or sickness you are dealing with, or what pharmaceutical drugs you may be on. And if they are not, in my view, you should stay away from them. Your safety and well-being should be of primary concern to them. If it is not, they are not doing their job. It is not to say or suggest that if you are dealing with chronic pain or chronic physical or mental illness, that you cannot use or voyage with entheogens or ayahuasca, but it is to say that you need to personally access and get the right support to do so, albeit from the relative medical practitioners and more particularly from the facilitator or shaman of the ceremony that you may be attending. A voyage into the abyss may be just the ticket you need to assist or guide you on the road to making a recovery from your chronicness. Spiritual preparation and intentions. Prior to the outset of my first few voyages, there was no conscious spiritual preparation involved whatsoever. After all, what is spiritual preparation? How can you spiritually prepare for something you have never experienced before, and something that most people cannot explain in very clear terms? Suffice to say, since my first encounter with voyaging with ayahuasca in particular, the anticipation alone of A next voyage almost automatically beckons me to take time out for some meditation, to listen to some appropriate voyaging music, and to spend a little time away from people in isolation, silence and stillness. This stuff kind of helps me get into the groove. In other words, my body is preparing or practicing itself for what lies ahead. My gutter instinct begins to take over to a certain extent, and my general demeanour is quieter and calmer than usual. This begins to kick in a month or so before my ceremony. Incidentally, this is also the period when my lucid dreams begin reoccurring. On setting intentions, this is a difficult one for me to reconcile or fully recommend, as my last intention was for Mother Ayahuasca to grow back and give me a full head of hair, and the results thus far are quite unsatisfactory. To me, setting an intention is like making a wish or seeking a desire of some kind. If you were handed a magic lamp and told you had 3 wishes, what would be your first wish? My first wish would be to have an infinite amount of wishes. Then there would be no concern or stress about deciding to make the right 3 wishes. You could just sit back, relax, be still, and enjoy the lamp for what it is. Some people suggest that setting an intention before a voyage is a good idea because, as they say, it helps you work with the plant medicine and for the plant medicine to work with you. You can tell it, Mother Ayahuasca, on a conscious level what you think you need from her to heal, assist, or guide you. The analogy being that if you go to a maths teacher to learn, for example, algebra, the maths teacher will probably say, okay, this is something we can do. But then in assessing you, the maths teacher figures out that you cannot add or subtract numbers. Then he or she is going to have to start with teaching you very basic maths principles and building from there. In my case, with my intention of growing all my hair back, Mother Ayahuasca didn't seem remotely interested, not even in bringing me back to the basics of how to start growing hair. Perhaps in time she will show me where it all went wrong and how to start putting it right. An intention can or may also act in some cases as a marker around which it can assist in making some sort of sense about the experience itself. It can act as a reference point on your voyage, so if you lose yourself and feel panicked about it, you can reflect upon your intentions, which may ground you again, which may also assist you in remembering stuff about your voyage or not. This in turn may help with interpretation and integration back into reality, so to speak. At the end of the day, your voyage or experience with the medicine plant may not grow your hair back to reflect your personal intention, but as suggested by others, it may provide a marker for both you and Mother Ayahuasca to begin a voyage of growth or discovery about what you really need as opposed to what you think you may want. Perhaps it's a better approach to set a definite intention rather than to traverse the inner dimension of time and space with expectations you may have accumulated from either reading this text/book or from any other sources. Each and every voyage will be very specific and personal to the voyager alone. Whilst many voyages for many voyagers can have similarities, no two are exactly the same. Therefore, setting a specific intention may also help you to let go of any pre-existing, predetermined or pre-programmed expectations and provide for less resistance to where Mother Ayahuasca may need to bring or take you on your voyage should you decide to imbibe. Set and setting. Set and setting is another term you will hear bandied around in certain voyaging circles. Set to me means what frame of mind or mindset you are in. Firstly, when or if you decide to voyage with Mother Ayahuasca or any other medicine plant for that matter, and secondly, what your mindset is like at or when you begin the voyage. Your mindset may also be partially determined by those you are voyaging with, those who are facilitating a voyage. In voyaging with entheogens or medicine plants, the whole process should be treated with great respect, but not too much reverence. There should also be a certain amount of fun in it as well. It should not be looked upon as something you do or are doing as a recreational affair. Although voyaging with Mother Ayahuasca can sometimes feel like an adventure holiday of sorts, do or do not, there is no try. By the time you get to voyage, a certain level of trust in yourself to surrender to Mother Ayahuasca is required. Surrender in this context meaning allowing your conscious or egoic mind to say what it needs to say, agree with it, and then move or step into being silent. Trying to silence your conscious or egoic mind does not work. Trying to do something is engaging your mind, and it defeats the purpose. You only end up in a battle of wills with your mind. In surrendering, it seems to help some people to have what is called a mantra, which can be a word, phrase, or sound repeated to aid in distracting your mind from thinking. Equally, certain body movements such as shaking the body or head can distract your egoic mind from processing too many thoughts. In other words, you are actively creating a vibration of sorts to distract the mind and at the same time relax the body. The physical setting you are in or are participating in, a medicine plant ceremony, should be as organic as possible. In other words, not a cold clinical setting like a hospital or an office. It should feel comfortable, be colourful and or visually stimulating to the eye. The music used or natural sounds around the ceremony ideally should not be the sound of the city, cars, trains, buses or planes. We do not want industrial sounds or background noise if at all possible. For me, music or organic sounds play a very big part in any voyage. The lead guide or facilitator or shaman no doubt will have chosen a large variety of music or sounds to suit the progress of the ceremony at different stages. Silence is sometimes the appropriate music as you lie. Recline or sit there listening to other people in their voyages, hearing their expressions and or listening to the sounds of nature. If it is an indoor voyage for the ceremony, alongside good music, sounds and comfort, it might also help to have the area, room or space scented, as nice smells can also add a certain extra dimension to the voyage. As mentioned before, your senses seem to be heightened on a voyage, so having all, if not most, of the aforementioned will add a great depth to a voyage. Before most, if not all ceremonies, and more to the point, before your first ayahuasca ceremony, be it a month, week, day, hour or minute before, your conscious or egoic mind may be resistant to taking or drinking this strange medicine plant. Most people find the smell and taste of ayahuasca quite putrid. No doubt you will have read about and or listened to people talking about imbibing ayahuasca, where you may have grasped that it is sometimes called the vine of the dead. It is called such a thing because it causes to a great extent your egoic or conscious mind to be silent. For a certain period of time, at least, if you cannot surrender to it, but of course not everyone can or will allow themselves to surrender to it. The egoic mind doesn't like to be silenced. It associates silence with death or dying. Most Western cultures and or religious traditions treat death as a taboo subject, as something to be feared, shunned, and to be put off for as long as possible, and most certainly not a topic for polite conversation, whatever that is. A personal theory, and quite a controversial one, even amongst some of the most intrepid and experienced voyagers, is as follows. There are now a substantial amount of people from Western traditions and cultures that have voyaged with Mother Ayahuasca who should not necessarily have voyaged yet, or may have voyaged too soon before being properly prepared for the experience, or perhaps should not have voyaged at all. In the original traditions of most indigenous cultures that had use of shamans or druids, it was their respective shaman or druid who did the initial voyaging, and most definitely not the ones seeking relief. Shamans or druids were the ones with the experience, the gnosis, the knowledge, and know-how to navigate the terrain of the other world, spaces or dimensions. It was the shaman or druid who would, where it appropriate, invite the one seeking relief to take the appropriate medicine plan specific to the assessment and under the supervision of the shaman or druid, which really makes a lot of sense. In all of my voyages, the vast majority of the voyagers or participants purged the ayahuasca from their body system, albeit some purged early, some purged later, and some purged much later into the retrospective voyages. Of course, there were always a few who did not purge at all, and there were also many who did not take a second or third glass of ayahuasca because they felt they may purge, so felt they either had enough medicine or they didn't wish to go any deeper into a voyage. In my view, it is an exceptionally brave thing for anyone to participate in an ayahuasca ceremony and to imbibe any amount of quantity of it. Therefore, expelling it or purging it seems to be a waste of perfectly good ayahuasca, in that this medicine plant, as suggested earlier, works on great many levels. So, the longer you can keep it down and allow it to course through your body, the greater the chance you are giving it to guide, assist, or help you heal. Now, to contradict the above, Western or so-called civilized society is profoundly sick, but most people are not fully aware of this. Everything tends to be about a measurement of acquisition or attainment of stuff, through competition, struggle, fighting, and in extreme cases battles or wars. Most people in Western civilizations primarily live and die in passive subjugation, never knowing what it is like to be free of the conditioning and programming that comes with living to acquire or gain wealth, status, power, or control over others or one's environment. This is a breeding ground for all the modern maladies people suffer from, such as depression, stress, anxiety, chronic pain, illness, and disease. Our diets are saturated with sugar, processed and genetically modified foods, pimped up with steroids, antibiotics, pesticides, and other chemicals of one sort or another. The food chain is concocted as opposed to natural or organic. Therefore, it is not surprising that a modern civilized body and egoic mind are so resistant to taking natural food or medicine in its rawest of forms, such as ayahuasca, and therefore it is not surprising that so many people purge or expel it. By and large, and by many accounts, people do feel better after a purge. Perhaps by purging, as suggested by many, they feel they have in some way physically and or emotionally purged or expelled some of the poisons or toxins they may have accumulated over a lifetime of living in a profoundly sick society. Maybe purging is more than just a simple metaphor for clearing out psychological or emotional blockages in a literal sense. People are removing food poisons and toxins that have been built up over a lifetime of consuming shit food and overwhelming social conditioning. Purging can also be represented as an emotional release, such as crying, wailing, screaming, yawning, laughter, and sleep. Human emotion is energy, and all energy needs a vent of sorts, so it does not build and become toxic to the body system. And thus emotional release may be the required antidote of the day, as opposed to physical vomiting or diarrhea. The cult of guruism. The idea of having and or subscribing to a guru or teacher of sorts may be noble. The challenge, or perhaps the problem, with this is that the student or follower is seldom, if ever, directly informed by a guru how to attain what they may seek, or may be seeking to attain, be that wisdom, enlightenment, insight, or something else. Most, but not all, so-called gurus, teachers, or masters will not inform you that you are good enough already. And the fact that you already wonder, seek, or search for something else will inevitably bring you to the door of enlightenment, insight, or something else, without trying too hard at all. In many ways, Gurus, teachers, and masters are the spiritual equivalent of contemporary religious leaders, medical doctors, psychoanalysts, and political/state leaders, etc., etc. In that they want to keep you coming back for more and more of their medicine, when, in fact, as someone famous once said, the kingdom of God is within you. For example, gurus can often and conveniently overlook telling you, you cannot attain enlightenment by wanting to attain it, or seldom, if ever, ask you, why would you want to attain something you already have? In these two sentences, you already have an answer of sorts, which cuts through a lot of toing and froing and messing about. It did, of course, take me a great many years to figure this out, but the final spark that ignited the fire came on my first voyage with the plant medicine Ayahuasca, which of course does not always happen for everyone all of the time. Mother Ayahuasca simply reminded me of what was already inherent in me and is inherent in all people of this planet, which is, you are far more than just your conscious sentiment or egoic mind, and you are nothing at the same time. This is not meant to sound or be vague. Being nothing is just as important and relevant as being something. Being nothing is ceasing to be attached to everything in this world that your egoic or conscious mind perceives, albeit for a temporary or extended period. Once you have reached this space, what need will you have for gurus, teachers, or masters, as you now become your own guru and can begin to remember how to navigate and chart a course to explore this and other realms or dimensions. Furthermore, it can now be done without the use of medicine plants, entheogens, or gurus for that matter. It is, of course, perhaps a healthy thing to have other Voyager friends, at least to discuss, debate, and bounce experiences, ideas, and concepts off, as opposed to a so-called archetypal all-knowing guru. The real work of a shaman per se, the term shaman here being used in general sense, is to make or create other shamans. We ask you to keep this in mind when or if you voyage or journey with any who purport or claim to be a shaman. In that you will have to be very brave indeed to do such a journey. Such journeys need not always involve the use of medicine plants, and a great shaman will be able to figure out your next steps with you, providing he or she is sure you are ready for the next most appropriate steps to take. In essence, as you evolve into becoming what is needed for you, you can ultimately act as being your own shaman and decide for yourself what, if anything, you will be next.